It was just over 5 years ago that the voters of Massachusetts said yes to legalizing recreational marijuana. Nearly 20,000 jobs have been created, and the state and cities and towns have taken in hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue. But a key element of the whole thing was supposed to be equity. Black and Latino entrepreneurs were to get help to open stores in the same communities that have long been over-policed and where people have been over-convicted as a result of the war on drugs. The state even created a social equity program to make it happen, but 5+ years on, far too many are still waiting. Reporting by the Boston Globe finds just 8% of companies that have opened marijuana facilities in Massachusetts are owned by people who participated in that equity program. So what's gone wrong? What needs to change for equity in the local pot industry to be fully realized? I'm joined now by the chair of the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, Stephen Hoffman, and Shaleen Title. Shaleen's a former commission member who co-wrote the language for the 2016 ballot question. She's now the CEO of the drug policy think tank, Parabola Center. Steve Hoffman, Shaleen Title, it's good to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. Always nice to see you.
So happy anniversary to you both. Starting with you, Steve Hoffman, how would you rate how far we've come in the first 5 years of legalization?
Well, let me start by saying that it's 5-year anniversary since question 4 was passed. I view it as the real start date was September 1st of 2017 when the commission was appointed. As you know, the legislature put question 4 on hold for about 8 months before the legislation was finally signed by Governor Baker in July of 2017. So, it has been 5 years, at least as far as my tenure goes, but it's been a long term. I think I agree with the headline you just showed from the Globe. It's unfinished business. I think we've made a lot of progress, not just in terms of the overall size and revenue generation of the industry, but we've made progress on equity. We are nowhere near where we need to be. But if you look at our numbers, which we share publicly every month at our public meetings, every month we see more and more social equity candidate applicants and economic empowerment applicants get provisional licenses, get final licenses open for business. So we're making progress, but we know we have a long ways to go.
Shaleen Title, would you share that 5-year end review?
Yeah, absolutely. We are making progress in our state, but I think there are a couple of very clear, concrete solutions that would address these issues that all three of us have been talking about at length for years, both ending the essentially legal extortion and corruption at the local level by addressing host community agreements and giving the commission the authority to review them, and then creating a fund for social equity because they're currently in an impossible situation where they can't get financing. And so we can use new cannabis tax revenue to create that fund. Those things are simple. They are no-brainer fixes. Virtually everyone agrees with them. And so the Cannabis Committee and the legislature really need to decide, are they going to implement those fixes or are they going to continue with inaction, which in that case, they're really proactively deciding that this multi-billion-dollar industry is going to be for wealthy white men and big tobacco. Those are really the two paths.
And if I wasn't clear, the social equity program was intended to help small entrepreneurs of color. As you both know, obviously you led the charge, Shaleen, and I know was fully embraced by the chairman as well. I want to play for you, Steve, something that Kobe Evans of Pure Oasis, the first person of color owner, who was on the show several times, but this is from 2019. While he got that first license for a person of color, he was talking about frustrations in other communities where he had sought licenses. Here's what Kobe had to say.
And unfortunately, the CCC is hamstrung by local municipalities, and my application, as well as everyone else's, is dependent upon a host agreement. And local municipalities don't recognize equity. They don't recognize the will of the voter as it relates to diversity in industry.
It's, it does seem these host communities obviously favor the bigs, big weed, big marijuana. And his point about equity, I hope people realize, is not rhetorical. While you statewide are bound by equity, the absurdity of the legislature's position in this, at least from my perspective, is they don't mandate the same equity requirements on the local level. It's an easy fix, and it should happen, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I agree. As you might be aware, our executive director, Sean Collins, and I wrote a letter to the legislature, and also published an op-ed piece. I think it might have been in the Globe. I don't recall exactly, saying exactly that, which is that, we can only give out licenses to applicants that make it through the host community agreement process in whatever city or town they want to operate. And so they're essentially the gatekeepers to equity, if you will. And while we have explicit equity mandates, as you pointed out at the state level, the cities and towns do not. I will say, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. There are a number of cities and towns around the state that on their own have taken up equity as a mandate, and I'll talk about Cambridge, Boston, Holyoke, and many others. So it's not, that no cities or towns think equity is important. I think a lot of them do, but it's because they think it's important, not because they're mandated to do so. And I think that is a shortcoming of the law, in my opinion.
Shaleen, while Steve Hoffman doesn't want to paint with a broad brush, I want to paint the legislature with a broad brush. They never wanted this legislation. 3 ballot questions had to pass for decriminalization, medical marijuana, and then recreational marijuana. And beyond this equity issue that all of us seem to agree upon in terms of the fix on the local level, there's a consensus that this 3% fee is used and abused by local communities. It was supposed to offset the costs of having a legal marijuana facility, but as the point was made in Dan Adams' 5-year review in the Globe the other day, other legal businesses don't need to pay these kinds of things. And the horror stories that we heard about what were going to happen in local communities, for the most part, never materialized. So it's purely because state legislators are at the knee of local officials that they don't deal with this. Is that not fair?
I think that's fair, except for Northampton and Lee. I give them credit.
They abolished the fees, right?
And I hope other cities follow. But in general, yes, the legislature really needs to do something about this. We have, again, near consensus. The commission has asked for it. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court pointed out that there is much needed clarity in the gaps here. There's been news articles, there've been research studies, there's been hearings. There was a hearing almost 6 months ago with near unanimous testaments from both experts and people affected. And so there's really no excuse at this point for not fixing this.
Steve Hoffman, since Shaleen mentioned the Chief Justice, the aptly named Kimberly Budd, I should say, what she actually said, I have it here, implementing the framework governing the new recreational marijuana industry has revealed gaps that the legislature and commission likely did not anticipate. Have you not done all you can on the issues we're talking about tonight, or is there still room for the commission to move?
Yeah, I'm probably the least complacent person you'll ever meet. So I will not say we've done everything we can. I think we've done a lot, but we continue to have outreach to the community and get ideas. I just had a meeting a few weeks ago with some of the newly licensed delivery couriers. It's a very important step towards equity because they're very low capital requirements to get into that business. And they're struggling as they're getting into it, as all new businesses struggle. But we listened to them, we got some ideas from them, and we're going to see what we can do to make it a little bit easier for them to get entry and be successful.
But Steve Hoffman, why is there not?
So that's one more step we can take, I guess.
You've supported the legislative creation of a loan fund that Shaleen was talking about. It'd be self-paying by the industry. Briefly, if you can, what's the argument against this?
You're asking me to put words into other people's mouths.
Well, again, I'm sorry. My attitude is the argument against it is it's going to help small entrepreneurs, which the big boys don't want to have happen. I mean,
yeah, again, I'm not going to speculate on the motives of others. I will say some of the arguments I've heard against an equity fund is that the monies generated by marijuana sales can be better used in other places. And again, I'm not going to debate that. But that's one argument. Second argument is, well, shouldn't the private sector be part of this or responsible for creating this fund? And, my answer to that is the private sector is willing to step up, but the state has to step up. And if the state steps up and creates a fund, I'm 100% certain that the private sector will participate in that fund, but the state needs to lead here. So, there are arguments against it. I don't agree with those arguments, but I'm not going to attribute motives to people that disagree with me.
Briefly, Shaleen, how about federal legislation? If we're no longer in the same Schedule 1 as heroin, would that help locally quickly if you can? Would it be a help to us in Massachusetts?
In small ways, it would help with banking. It may help with capital. But the bigger problem is that Massachusetts has actually done one thing really well, which is preventing corporate domination of the market by a few big companies.
By limiting the numbers.
I'm sorry?
By limiting the numbers that they can
By
control or
limiting
own.
the
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can own or control up to 3 licenses, and the commission has done a great job of enforcing that. So federal legalization could potentially upend that, start interstate commerce, and totally change the Massachusetts market. So we want to do that deliberately and intentionally rather than quickly without thinking about it.
Steve Hoffman, I only have 30 seconds. I want to end with something you have no control over, which is the stigma. 68% of the people in America, including a ton of Republicans, support legalization. I think half of America lives in states where they're legalized, but there's still a stigma. Still not seen like alcohol quickly. Why do you think that is?
I think stigmas can't be legislated or regulated away. I think stigmas take time. And I'm actually seeing progress on that in Massachusetts as people see this as a safe industry. It's a well-regulated industry. It's a professionally run industry. So I don't think you can do anything but just have to give people time to see this is a normal business that's a good addition to any community.
Right, and none of the fears that the opponents, like much greater usage by young people, all that sort of stuff, have come to pass. Steve Hoffman, Shaleen Title, thanks for your work. Happy anniversary, and it's good to see you both.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks so much.